The crystalline ships moved through space like elegant dancers, their hulls catching starlight and splitting it into rainbow patterns. Commander Veltar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the small yellow star grow larger on the viewing screen. His long, slender fingers traced patterns on the command console as he studied the readings from his science team. "Another primitive system," he said to his second-in-command, Officer Keshra. "3 rocky planets, 1 gas giant, some moons. The 3rd planet shows signs of life." Keshra nodded, her crystalline features reflecting the soft blue light of their instruments. "Shall we proceed with standard contact protocols, Commander?" Veltar smiled. In his 40 years of exploration, he had made first contact with 17 different species. Each time had been the same peaceful process. They would approach, send greeting messages, and within days have another civilization ready to join the Galactic Federation. These younger species were always eager to learn from their more advanced neighbors. "Begin the approach," he ordered. "Keep our shields at minimum power. We don't want to appear threatening." The Zephyrian fleet consisted of 5 ships, each one a work of art. Their hulls were made from grown crystal that could bend light around them, making them nearly invisible when needed. Energy weapons were built into the ship's structure, able to fire precise beams that could disable enemy systems without causing permanent damage. Violence was rare in the galaxy, and when it did occur, it was always conducted with grace and minimal destruction. Far away, on the dark bridge of the USS Liberty, Captain Jake Morrison stared at the same readings with very different eyes. His ship was a monster compared to the alien vessels. Where the Zephyrian ships were smooth and graceful, the Liberty was angular and brutal. Thick armor plating covered every surface. Missile pods jutted out from the hull like metal thorns. Railguns lined the ship's spine, ready to fire solid metal slugs at incredible speeds. "Sir, we're picking up 5 unknown contacts," reported Lieutenant Commander Lisa Parker from her communication station. "They're definitely artificial, ship-sized." Morrison's weathered face showed no emotion. He had spent 20 years in the Earth Navy, fighting pirates and rebels in the outer colonies. First contact with aliens was something the politicians had talked about, but he had never expected to be the one facing it. "Battle stations," he ordered quietly. The bridge lights dimmed to red as alarms sounded throughout the ship. Crew members ran to their positions. Major Ben Collins took his place at the weapons console, his fingers dancing over controls that could unleash enough firepower to level a city. Chief Warrant Officer Amy Rodriguez checked her missile systems, making sure every warhead was ready to launch. "Sir, shouldn't we try to communicate first?" asked Parker. Morrison looked at her. Parker was young, fresh from the academy. She still believed in peaceful solutions. "We will, but we'll be ready for anything." On the Zephyrian flagship, Veltar was puzzled by what his sensors were showing him. "This is strange," he said to Kashira. "Their ship appears to be mostly metal, heavy metal. And those protrusions on the hull, what could they be for?" "Perhaps some kind of mining equipment," suggested Keshira. "This species might still be in their industrial phase." Veltar nodded. It made sense. Many primitive species went through a phase where they built crude, heavy machinery before learning to work with more elegant materials like grown crystal or shaped energy. "Begin the greeting transmission." The message that reached the Liberty was unlike anything humans had ever received. It came as a complex pattern of light and sound, beautiful but completely alien. The ship's computers worked frantically to decode it, while Parker tried to make sense of what they were hearing. "It's definitely a communication attempt," she reported. "The computer is finding patterns, mathematical sequences. They're trying to establish a common language." Morrison nodded. "Send our standard first contact message. Keep it simple." The human response was very different from what the Zephyrians expected. Instead of elegant patterns of light and music, they received a straightforward radio transmission. The voice was flat, mechanical, speaking in precise mathematical terms and basic pictographs designed to establish communication with any intelligent species. But when the Zephyrian translation computers processed the human message, something went wrong. The military protocols that humans used as standard procedure were interpreted as aggressive posturing. Phrases like "maintain safe distance" and "state your intentions" came across as threats and demands. "Commander," said Kashira, her voice tight with worry, "their message appears to be hostile. They're ordering us to stop and surrender." Veltar's eyes widened. In all his years of exploration, no species had ever responded to first contact with aggression. "Are you certain?" "The translation matrix is very clear, sir. They view us as a threat." On the Liberty's bridge, Parker was having similar problems. The alien response was coming through their computers as a series of warnings and what appeared to be weapon targeting data. "Sir," she said, "I think they're trying to lock weapons onto us." Morrison's jaw tightened. His ship was alone, deep in space, facing 5 unknown vessels. Everything in his military training told him that he was in immediate danger. "Shields, up," he ordered. "Charge all weapons." The Liberty's defensive systems came online with a low hum that vibrated through the ship's hull. Energy screens flickered to life around the vessel, while targeting computers began tracking the alien ships. Veltar watched in alarm as the human ship suddenly blazed with energy. What he was seeing didn't match anything in Zephyrian experience. Instead of elegant, minimal defensive measures, the human ship was armoring itself like a creature preparing for a brutal fight. "Sir, they're powering weapons," reported his tactical officer. "Multiple weapon systems. I've never seen anything like it." Fear crept into Veltar's voice. "Fire a warning shot. Show them we're armed, but don't intend harm." The Zephyrian ship fired a single precise beam of energy that flashed across the Liberty's bow. It was meant as a universal signal of caution, the galactic equivalent of raising one's hands to show peaceful intent while displaying strength. But to Morrison and his crew, it looked like an attack that had barely missed. "They fired on us," reported Collins, his hand hovering over the firing controls. Morrison's decision was instant and decisive. 20 years of military experience had taught him that in space, the first shot was often the only shot that mattered. Return. "Fire," he ordered. "All weapons. Show them what humans do when someone shoots at us." The USS Liberty's response was immediate and terrible. Major Ben Collins pressed the firing controls, and the human warship unleashed hell upon the Zephyrian fleet. The first salvo came from the railguns mounted along the ship's spine. These weapons did not fire energy beams or plasma bolts like civilized species used. Instead, they launched solid metal slugs the size of telephone poles at speeds that made them blur into streaks of light. Commander Veltar watched in horror as the first projectile struck his flagship's energy shield. In 40 years of space combat, he had never seen anything like what happened next. The shield flickered once, twice, then simply vanished as the metal slug tore through it like it was made of paper. The projectile continued on, punching a hole clean through the crystalline hull of his ship. "Impossible," whispered Officer Keshira, staring at her readings. "Our shields are designed to stop any energy weapon in the galaxy." How did a simple piece of metal penetrate them? The answer was something the Zephyrians had never considered. Their shields worked by deflecting and absorbing energy. They had never encountered a species primitive enough to still use kinetic weapons. The metal slugs carried no energy signature that the shields could recognize or stop. They were just solid matter moving very, very fast. The second railgun fired, then the third. Each shot found its mark with mechanical precision. The human targeting computers had analyzed the alien ships in seconds, identifying weak points and calculating firing solutions. Where Zephyrian weapons were designed to disable and capture, human weapons were built to destroy completely. Collins watched his screens with professional satisfaction. "First target is venting atmosphere," he reported calmly. "Moving to target 2. But the railguns were just the beginning. Chief Warrant Officer Amy Rodriguez had been waiting for her moment, and now it came. She pressed her launch controls, and missile pods all along the Liberty's hull opened like deadly flowers. Dozens of warheads streaked out toward the alien fleet, each one guided by its own computer brain. The Zephyrians had never seen weapons like these either. Their own missiles were elegant things designed to deliver precise electromagnetic pulses that would disable enemy systems without causing permanent damage. Human missiles were different. These were nuclear warheads, each one carrying enough explosive power to level a mountain. The first missile struck the second Zephyrian ship and detonated in a flash of light that could be seen from 3 star systems away. The explosion didn't just damage the alien vessel. It completely destroyed it, turning the graceful crystalline ship into a cloud of glowing particles that sparkled like deadly snow. Veltar's hands shook as he tried to process what he was seeing. "They destroyed the entire ship," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "One weapon, one ship completely gone." The electromagnetic pulse from the nuclear explosion washed over the remaining Zephyrian vessels, causing their delicate systems to flicker and fail. Lights went out on bridge displays, navigation computers crashed, communication arrays went silent. The aliens had never encountered weapons designed to cause such widespread destruction. "All ships, retreat to minimum safe distance," Veltar ordered, but half his fleet couldn't hear him. Their communication systems were down, damaged by the nuclear pulse that had never been designed to handle such crude electromagnetic interference. The third and fourth missiles found their targets. More explosions lit up space. More Zephyrian. Ships died or were crippled. The aliens watched in growing terror as the human vessel continued its attack with mechanical efficiency. There was no pause for surrender negotiations, no attempt to disable rather than destroy. The humans fought like they were trying to kill every living thing in the enemy fleet. But what terrified the Zephyrians most was not the weapons themselves. It was how the human ship moved. Where alien vessels glided through space with elegant grace, the Liberty moved like a predator. Its fusion drives roared to life, pushing the heavy warship into sudden acceleration that should have been impossible for something so massive. The ship twisted and turned with aggressive purpose, bringing different weapon systems to bear as it maneuvered. Captain Morrison stood on his bridge, calling out orders in a calm, professional voice that chilled Veltar to his core when the alien commander heard it through intercepted communications. "Target the lead ship's engine section," Morrison ordered. "Rodriguez, prepare a spread of conventional warheads. Collins, keep those railguns firing. I want that fleet scattered in the next 5 minutes." The human crew worked with terrifying efficiency. They didn't pause to consider the lives they were ending. They didn't show mercy to damaged ships trying to retreat. They treated the battle like a job to be completed, a problem to be solved through overwhelming force. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Parker monitored alien communications, her face pale as she translated the panic in Zephyrian voices. "Sir, they're trying to surrender," she reported. Morrison's expression didn't change. "Are they powering down weapons?" Parker checked her readings. "No, sir. Their weapon systems are still active." "Then they're not surrendering. They're regrouping. Continue firing." This was the moment that changed everything for the Zephyrian survivors. They realized they were not facing another civilized species that would accept surrender and negotiate terms. They were facing beings who understood only victory or defeat. The humans would fight until either they were destroyed or their enemies were completely eliminated. Veltar's flagship shuddered as another railgun slug punched through its hull. Emergency alarms filled the bridge as atmosphere vented from a dozen holes. His beautiful ship, grown over decades from living crystal, was being torn apart by crude metal projectiles fired by beings who seemed to view destruction as an art form. "All ships that can move retreat immediately," he ordered. "Send emergency transmission to the Federation Council. We have encountered a hostile species unlike anything in our records." The surviving Zephyrian ships turned and fled, their elegant forms limping away from the human warship as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. Behind them, the Liberty continued to fire, sending railgun slugs and missiles after the retreating aliens until they were out of range. On the human bridge, the crew began their post-battle procedures with professional calm. Damage reports were filed. Weapon systems were recharged. Medical teams checked for casualties. It was all routine for them, just another day at the office. But for the Zephyrians racing away through space, nothing would ever be routine again. They had seen the face of a species that made war the way others made art, and the sight would haunt their dreams for the rest of their lives. The emergency beacon from Commander Veltar's fleet reached the nearest Zephyrian battle group within hours. Admiral Zefcon received the desperate transmission with disbelief. A single alien ship had destroyed or crippled half of an exploration fleet. It seemed impossible. "Gather the 3rd and 5th battle groups," Zefcon ordered his staff. "We will show these primitives what happens when they attack the Federation." 24 Zephyrian warships moved toward the human solar system, their crystalline hulls gleaming with confidence. These were not exploration vessels, but true warships, equipped with the most advanced weapons the Federation had ever created. Admiral Zefcon had commanded fleets for 60 years. He had never lost a battle. On the USS Liberty, Captain Jake, Morrison watched the approaching alien fleet with professional interest. His ship had taken minor damage in the first encounter, but his crew had already completed repairs. Executive Officer Commander Rick Thompson stood beside him, studying the tactical display. 24 ships, sir," Thompson reported. "They're maintaining formation, approaching from the outer system." Morrison nodded. "They want a proper battle. Collins, what's our weapon status?" Major Ben Collins checked his systems. "All rail. Guns operational, sir. Missile magazines at 80%. We're ready for them." "Sir," interrupted Dr. Sophie Grant from the science station, "I've been analyzing the wreckage from the first battle. Their technology is interesting but predictable. I think I know how to hurt them even more." Morrison turned to look at the young science officer. Grant had joined the crew fresh from MIT, brilliant but untested in combat. "Explain." "Their ships use crystalline matrices for both structure and electronics," Grant said, her voice excited. "If we can generate electromagnetic pulses at specific frequencies, we can cause resonance failures throughout their entire ship." "In simple terms, Doctor," Grant smiled. We can make their ships tear themselves apart from the inside. Morrison considered this. In the old Earth navies, captains had fought with honor and tradition, but space was different. In space, honor got you killed. Do it! Modify our weapons! The alien fleet entered the asteroid belt near Jupiter, expecting to find the human ship waiting for them in open space. Instead, they found nothing. Their sensors swept the area but detected only rocks and ice floating in the dark. "Where are they?" Admiral Zefcon muttered, studying his displays. The answer came in the form of a massive asteroid that suddenly changed course and slammed into the lead Zephyrian ship. The aliens watched in shock as the rock, which had been drifting peacefully through space moments before, revealed itself to be hollow. The human ship had been hiding inside it. Morrison's voice echoed across the bridge of the Liberty as his ship emerged from its rocky camouflage. "Fire all weapons! Thompson, take us to the next position." The railguns opened fire from point-blank range, tearing through the surprised alien vessel before it could raise shields. But this was only the beginning of Morrison's plan. The Liberty didn't stay to fight. Instead, it vanished back into the asteroid field, leaving the aliens staring at empty space. "Find them!" Zefcon ordered. "All ships, spread formation and search." The Zephyrian fleet split up, moving through the asteroids in hunting groups. It was exactly what Morrison had hoped they would do. Chief Engineer Lieutenant Colonel Helen Price had spent hours preparing for this moment, modifying the ship's stealth systems to work in the dense asteroid field. The next attack came from above. The Liberty emerged from behind a tumbling mountain of ice and metal, firing a spread of modified missiles before disappearing again. But these weren't normal nuclear warheads. Dr. Grant had programmed them to explode at the exact frequency needed to cause resonance failures in crystalline structures. The Zephyrian ships that were hit didn't just take damage, they began to shake, themselves apart as their own crystal hulls vibrated at destructive frequencies. Elegant spires cracked and fell. Beautiful curved sections split along stress lines. The aliens watched their perfect ships become twisted wreckage in minutes. "What kind of weapons are these?" Zefcon demanded. But his science officers had no answers. The human ship struck again and again, always from unexpected directions. It used asteroids as shields and weapons, pushing chunks of rock toward alien ships with precisely calculated force. It fired from hiding spots that sensors couldn't detect. It moved through the asteroid field like it belonged there, while the graceful Zephyrian ships struggled to navigate the debris. Lieutenant Commander Paul Bennett, the Liberty's intelligence officer, monitored alien communications from his station. "Sir, they're getting desperate. Their formation is breaking down." Morrison studied the tactical display. Half the alien fleet was damaged or destroyed, and the rest were scattered throughout the asteroid field. It was time for the final phase of his plan. "All hands prepare for sustained combat," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We're going hunting." What followed was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was a systematic extermination. The Liberty moved from asteroid to asteroid, tracking down isolated alien ships and destroying them one by one. The human crew worked. With mechanical precision, their weapons modified to exploit every weakness Dr. Grant had discovered. The Zephyrians tried to fight back, but their elegant energy weapons were useless against an enemy that refused to stand still and trade shots. Their precise targeting systems couldn't lock onto a ship that hid behind rocks and struck from the darkness. Their sophisticated tactics meant nothing against an opponent who treated space combat like three-dimensional chess. Chief Warrant Officer Amy Rodriguez launched her missiles with surgical precision, each warhead programmed to cause maximum damage to crystalline structures. The explosions that followed were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of simple destruction, the alien ships died in cascades of shattering crystal and collapsing support beams. Admiral Zefcon found himself alone on his flagship, the last survivor of a fleet that had been the pride of the Federation. His beautiful ship was surrounded by the wreckage of his command, floating chunks of crystal that had once been mighty warships. "This is impossible," he whispered, staring at his tactical display. "One ship cannot defeat an entire battle group." But the evidence was all around him. The human vessel emerged from the asteroid field like a mechanical predator, its dark hull scarred but intact. Morrison's voice came across the communication channels, speaking in the flat, emotionless tone that had terrified alien listeners throughout the battle. "Alien vessel, you are surrounded and outgunned. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded." Zefcon looked at his weapon controls, then at the human ship bristling with guns pointed at his bridge. For the first time in 60 years of command, he surrendered. Admiral Zefcon's emergency transmission traveled across the galaxy at the speed of light, carrying news that would change everything. The message was simple, but terrifying. An entire Zephyrian battle group had been destroyed by a single human warship. 24 of the Federation's finest vessels, reduced to floating wreckage by beings who fought like mechanical demons. The transmission reached the Zephyrian homeworld first, where the High Council gathered in emergency session. Council Leader. Miraheth read the report 3 times before she could believe what she was seeing. Her delicate crystalline features showed confusion and fear as she addressed the assembled leaders. "This cannot be accurate," she said, her voice trembling. "One ship cannot destroy an entire battle group. Admiral Zefcon must be mistaken." But the data recordings told the truth. The human vessel had used tactics that no civilized species would ever consider. It had hidden among asteroids like some primitive ambush predator. It had turned space debris into weapons. It had modified its armaments during combat to exploit weaknesses in Zephyrian technology. Most disturbing of all, it had shown no mercy to damaged ships trying to retreat. Council member Velnash studied the tactical recordings with growing horror. "Look at how they move," he whispered. "They don't fight like any species we know. They fight like they were born for war." The news spread quickly through the Galactic Communication Network. The Helix Consortium, a peaceful trading alliance of 12 species, received the transmission and immediately called an emergency meeting. The Void Singers, an ancient race of philosophers, interrupted their century-long meditation to discuss this new threat. Even the Machine Collective, artificial intelligences who rarely concerned themselves with biological affairs, took notice of the human combat data. On the human ship Liberty, Lieutenant Commander Paul Bennett monitored the growing flood of alien communications. Captain Morrison stood beside him, reading the translated messages that appeared on his screen. "They're scared, sir," Bennett reported. "I'm intercepting transmissions from dozens of different species. They're all talking about us." Morrison nodded grimly. He had hoped that defeating the alien attack would end the conflict. Instead, it seemed to be making things worse. "What are they saying?" "Most of them are calling us monsters," Bennett said. "Some want to attack us before we can spread. Others think we should be avoided completely. There's a lot of panic out there." Dr. Sophie Grant looked up from her science station, where she had been analyzing captured alien technology. "Sir, I think I understand why they're so frightened. Their entire approach to warfare is different from ours. They fight to disable and capture. We fight to win." "Explain." Grant pulled up holographic displays showing alien weapon designs. Look at their energy weapons. They're designed to overload enemy systems without causing permanent damage. Their shields are meant to absorb and redirect attacks, not stop them completely. Even their ship designs prioritize beauty and elegance over protection. Morrison studied the alien technology with the eye of a professional soldier. They fight like they're playing a game. Exactly. And we fight like we're trying to survive. To them, we must look like savages who turned warfare into a science. The truth of Grant's words became clear as more alien communications reached Earth. Admiral Karen Scott, commanding the Earth Defense Fleet from Luna Base, received reports from monitoring stations throughout the solar system. Alien ships were gathering at the edges of human space, but they weren't approaching. They were watching from a safe distance, studying humanity like scientists observing dangerous animals. "Ma'am," reported her intelligence officer. "Commander, Troy Martinez, we're detecting massive fleet movements throughout this sector. Every major alien power is repositioning ships to keep watch on us." Scott studied the tactical displays showing dozens of alien vessels at the outer edges of the solar system. "Are they preparing to attack?" "No, ma'am. They're maintaining distance. It's like they're afraid to get too close." The fear was real and growing. On the Helix Consortium homeworld, Trade Minister Kalison addressed a crowd of worried civilians. His blue-scaled features showed the strain of the past few days as he tried to calm his people. "The humans are contained in their system," he announced. "Our fleets are monitoring them. They have not attempted to expand beyond their borders." But his words brought little comfort. The crowd had seen the battle recordings that were now spreading through civilian networks across the galaxy. They had watched human weapons tear through the most advanced ships the galaxy had ever built. They had heard the cold, professional voices of human officers treating mass destruction like routine work. An old Helix female raised her voice from the crowd. "What if they decide to expand? What if they come here?" Kalison had no answer. The human ship had demonstrated capabilities that no one understood. Their weapons used principles that galactic science considered primitive, yet they were devastatingly effective. Their tactics showed an understanding of warfare that was both brilliant and terrifying. Similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The Void Singers, who had spent millennia perfecting the art of peaceful negotiation, found themselves discussing military preparations for the first time in their recorded history. The Machine Collective began upgrading their defensive systems, calculating that human unpredictability made them a threat that could not be reasoned with. But perhaps the most significant change occurred in the galactic military academies. Young officers from 100 different species studied the human battle recordings, trying to understand how one ship had achieved the impossible. The lessons they learned would change warfare throughout the galaxy. At the Zephyrian Naval Institute, Instructor Vextar showed the Jupiter asteroid battle to a class of shocked cadets. "Notice how they use their environment," he said, his voice filled with reluctant admiration. "They turn every piece of space debris into a potential weapon. They hide where our sensors cannot find them. They strike from unexpected angles." One cadet raised her hand. "Instructor, such tactics are dishonorable. They violate every rule of civilized warfare." Vextar paused, considering his words carefully. "Perhaps. But they are also effective. The humans won a battle that should have been impossible. Honor means nothing if you are dead." The cadet's face showed confusion and fear. She had been trained to fight with elegance and precision, following rules that had governed galactic warfare for thousands of years. The idea that someone might ignore those rules, might fight to win at any cost, was deeply disturbing. Across the galaxy, a new phrase began to appear in alien languages. Fighting like humans became synonymous with brutal efficiency and terrifying competence. Parents used it to frighten disobedient children. Military officers used it to describe their worst nightmares. And in the depths of space, human patrol ships continued their routes, unaware that their very existence had become a legend that would reshape galactic civilization. 6 months after the Jupiter asteroid battle, the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Trade routes that had existed for thousands of years were abandoned if they passed too close to human space. Exploration fleets carried new orders to retreat immediately if they detected any vessel matching human design patterns. The word human had entered dozens of alien languages, always spoken in whispers, always carrying the weight of fear. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the USS Constitution, watching a sight that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. At the edge of the solar system, nearly 100 alien ships maintained their silent vigil. They came from 20 different species, representing every major power in the local galactic region, but none of them came closer than 10 billion kilometers to Earth. "Still no communication attempts?" Morrison asked his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Commander Paul Bennett. "No, sir. They just watch. Our long-range sensors show they're scanning us constantly, but they won't respond to any of our diplomatic signals." Morrison nodded grimly. He had been promoted to admiral and placed in charge of humanity's first official contact protocols. It was a job that seemed impossible. How do you make peaceful contact with species that are terrified of you, Ambassador? Claire Watson joined him on the bridge, her diplomatic credentials seeming worthless in the face of galactic fear. She had spent her career negotiating with hostile human factions, but aliens were a different challenge entirely. "Any word from the diplomatic corps?" Morrison asked her. Watson shook her head. "They're as confused as we are. Every message we send gets the same response. Silence. It's like they're afraid that talking to us will somehow make us more dangerous." The truth was more complex than either of them realized. In the depths of space, aboard the Zephyrian observation ship Gentle Light, Commander Veltar struggled with orders that made no sense to him. He had been assigned to watch the humans and report their activities, but he was forbidden from making. "Contact! They're sending out diplomatic signals again," reported his communications officer. Veltar studied the translated messages appearing on his screen. The humans were asking for peaceful dialogue, offering to share scientific knowledge, proposing trade agreements. Their messages were polite, professional, almost boring in their diplomatic formality. "They sound reasonable," his second officer observed. "That's what makes them so dangerous," Veltar replied. "Look at the recordings again. During battle, they were calm, professional, efficient. They destroyed our ships like they were solving mathematical problems. Now they're being diplomatic the same way. Everything they do perfectly." The fear wasn't limited to military officers. Throughout the galaxy, civilian populations had learned about the humans through news broadcasts and entertainment programs. Children's stories now featured dark ships from the edge of space, crewed by beings who fought wars like other species practiced art. On the trading world of New Harmony, a Helix merchant named Kessela told her young daughter a bedtime story that had become popular across the galaxy. "Long ago," Kessela said, "the galaxy was peaceful. All the smart species had learned to solve problems with words, not weapons. But far away in a small yellow star system, there lived a species that had never learned this lesson. The child's eyes widened with frightened delight. The humans? Yes, little one, the humans. They built ships of dark metal and filled them with terrible weapons. When they came to space, they brought their wars with them. They fight not for territory or resources, but because fighting is what they do best. Stories like this spread from world to world, growing more elaborate with each telling. Humans became the monsters that alien parents used to ensure good behavior. Be quiet, or the humans might hear you. Finish your studies, or you'll be as primitive as the humans. Don't fight with your siblings, unless you want to become like the war-loving humans. But not everyone was content to simply avoid humanity. In secret military facilities across the galaxy, alien strategists studied human combat footage with obsessive dedication. They analyzed every tactic, every weapon, every decision made during the battles. What they learned disturbed them even more than the original defeats. On the Void Singer homeworld, military analyst Zenko presented his findings to the Pacifist Council, beings who had not considered warfare for over 2,000 years. Humans don't just fight effectively, he reported. They fight intelligently. Every action serves multiple purposes. When they hid in asteroids, they weren't just seeking cover. They were forcing us to split our forces. When they modified their weapons during battle, they weren't just adapting, they were testing our weaknesses for future encounters. Council Elder Mirison, whose species had achieved enlightenment through the rejection of violence, found herself asking questions she had never thought to consider. Are you saying they plan their battles in advance? More than that, Zenko replied. I believe they plan for battles they haven't fought yet. Their ship designs, their weapon systems, their crew training, everything is optimized for combat scenarios they might encounter someday. They don't just prepare for war. They prepare for wars that don't exist yet. This revelation sent shockwaves through the galactic military community. The idea that a species might dedicate so much effort to preparing for conflict was alien to races that had learned to resolve disputes through negotiation and compromise. Some alien commanders began to secretly incorporate human tactics into their own forces. Admiral Zephcon, the sole survivor of the Jupiter battle, found himself teaching courses on asymmetric warfare to Zephyrian officers who had never heard such terms before. Forget everything you know about honorable combat, he told his students. The humans have shown us that honor is a luxury we can't afford. If you want to survive an encounter with them, you must learn to think like them. His words were recorded and transmitted throughout the galaxy, reaching military academies on dozens of worlds. A new generation of alien officers began training in tactics that their ancestors would have considered barbaric. They learned to use their environment as a weapon. They practiced targeting civilian infrastructure. They studied the art of total warfare. The changes weren't limited to military thinking. Trade agreements began, including clauses about human-style conflicts. Insurance policies for interstellar shipping added premiums for routes that might encounter aggressive species. Diplomatic protocols were rewritten to address contacts with militaristic civilizations. But perhaps the most significant change was in how alien species viewed themselves. For thousands of years, they had believed that intelligence naturally led to peaceful cooperation. The existence of humans challenged this fundamental assumption. If beings could be both highly intelligent and aggressively warlike, what did that say about the nature of consciousness itself? On Earth, Admiral Morrison remained unaware of the philosophical crisis he had triggered. He stood on his bridge, watching the alien fleet maintain its distant vigil, and wondered if humanity would ever find its place among the stars. "Sir," reported his communications officer, We're receiving a transmission from the lead alien vessel. Morrison's heart jumped. Finally, after months of silence, they were going to make contact. The message was brief and formal. Human Fleet Commander, this is the Galactic Observation Force. We acknowledge your presence. Maintain current position. Do not approach our vessels. Do not attempt expansion beyond your current system boundaries. We will continue monitoring. Morrison stared at the message for a long moment. They weren't offering friendship or trade or cultural exchange. They were offering containment. Humanity had achieved something no species in galactic history had ever accomplished. They had become so feared that an entire region of space would reorganize itself just to keep them isolated. As he looked out at the alien ships keeping their fearful distance, Morrison realized that the galaxy had learned an important lesson about humanity. They had learned that somewhere in the dark between the stars, there were beings who treated war as a science to be perfected. And that knowledge would change everything. 2 years had passed since the Jupiter asteroid battle, and the Galactic Federation Council had finally decided what to do about the human problem. The great crystalline chamber on the neutral world of Nexus Prime buzzed with voices from 100 different species, all gathered to discuss the fate of humanity. High Counselor Thexara, a being whose translucent blue skin showed the slow pulse of her ancient heart, called the assembly to order. Her species, the Ethereals, had guided galactic civilization for over 10,000 years. They were known for their wisdom, their patience, and their complete inability to understand violence. We are here to address the matter of the aggressive species known as humans, she announced, her voice carrying the weight of ages. For 2 standard years, they have remained contained within their single star system. Our observation fleets report no expansion attempts, no hostile actions beyond their borders. A murmur of relief rippled through the assembled delegates. Many had feared that the humans would begin a campaign of conquest across the galaxy. The fact that they seemed content to stay in their own system was encouraging. Counselor Vel Nash, of the Zephyrian delegation, stood to address the assembly. His crystalline features still bore the scars of his encounter with human weapons, and his voice carried bitter experience. Honored colleagues, I must remind you that these beings destroyed 2 of our fleets with a single warship. Their containment may be temporary. But his warning was met with dismissive gestures from several delegates. Trade Minister Collison of the Helix Consortium rose to speak, his blue scales gleaming under the chamber's lights. Counselor Velnash speaks from trauma, Collison said smoothly. Yes, the humans demonstrated unexpected military capabilities, but they have shown no interest in expansion. Perhaps we have been overly cautious. Ambassador Zixtel from the Machine Collective added her mechanical voice to the discussion. Analysis of human behavior patterns suggests they are reactive rather than proactive. They respond to perceived threats, but do not initiate unprovoked aggression. High Counselor Thexara nodded thoughtfully. The Ethereals had spent months analyzing every piece of data about humanity, and their conclusions were surprising. Despite their fearsome reputation, humans seemed to be following a defensive strategy. The question before us, Thexara continued, is whether these humans deserve representation in our Federation. They have achieved interstellar travel. They have demonstrated intelligence. By our ancient laws, they qualify for membership. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. The idea of inviting the humans to join the Federation seemed insane to many delegates. But others saw opportunity in the suggestion. Senator Qualren of the Void Singers spoke in his species' characteristic whispers. If we bring them into the Federation, we can monitor them closely. We can teach them our ways of peace. Teach them. Velnash's voice cracked with disbelief. You cannot teach a carnivore to eat grass. These beings are warriors by nature. But the mood in the chamber was shifting. The initial fear of humanity was being replaced by something more dangerous: overconfidence. Many delegates had convinced themselves that the human victories were flukes, accidents that could never be repeated against a prepared enemy. General Corksmaven of the Helix military spoke with the authority of someone who had never lost a battle. I have studied the human combat recordings extensively. Their tactics are crude but effective against unprepared opponents. However, they rely heavily on surprise and unconventional warfare. Against a properly prepared force, they would be easily defeated. His words drew approving nods from many delegates. The general continued, warming to his theme. Furthermore, their technology is primitive. They use kinetic weapons that any competent engineer could design counters for. Their ships are slow and heavily armored because they lack the sophistication for proper defensive systems. Ambassador Zixtel added her support. Machine collective analysis confirms that human technology is approximately 800 standard years behind Federation norms. They compensate for this deficit through aggressive application of inferior systems. High Counselor Thexara listened to the growing chorus of voices that diminished the human threat. It was natural, she reflected. Fear could not be sustained indefinitely without reinforcement. The humans had remained quiet for 2 years, and memory of their victories was fading. Perhaps, she said carefully, we have indeed been overly cautious. The humans have shown no expansion beyond their system. They respond to our diplomatic signals even if they do not receive replies. They appear to want peaceful contact. Counselor. Velnash made one last desperate attempt to warn his colleagues. I have faced their weapons personally. I have seen what they can do when threatened. If you provoke them, interrupted General Corksmaven with a laugh. Honored Counselor, they are contained in a single system by our observation fleets. What could they possibly do to threaten the combined might of the Federation? The laughter that followed was the sound of 100 species that had forgotten the lessons of the Jupiter battle. They had analyzed the human victories until they convinced themselves that understanding was the same as defeating. Trade Minister Callison saw opportunity in the changing mood. I propose we send a formal delegation to the human system, not to offer membership, but to establish our authority. They should understand their place in the galactic order. An excellent suggestion, agreed Ambassador Zixtel. A show of strength will demonstrate Federation resolve while opening channels for eventual integration. High Counselor Thexara considered the proposal. A formal delegation would indeed send a clear message about Federation authority. And if the humans truly were as contained as they appeared, such a mission would carry little risk. Very well, she decided. We shall send a diplomatic mission to establish formal contact with humanity. General Corksmaven, you will command the escort fleet. The general's eyes gleamed with anticipation. Finally, a chance to face the legendary humans and prove that Federation military doctrine was superior to their crude brutality. How large an escort fleet? He asked. 200 ships, Thexara replied. Representatives from every major military power in the Federation. We will show these humans the true strength of galactic civilization. As the council session ended and delegates began planning for the greatest diplomatic mission in Federation history, none of them noticed the small figure of Velnash slipping away from the chamber. The old Zephyrian commander made his way to a private communication booth and began composing an urgent message. On Earth, Admiral Morrison received the intercepted transmission with growing concern. The message was brief, but clear. A massive alien fleet was being assembled to visit humanity. The aliens called it a diplomatic mission, but they were bringing enough firepower to sterilize a planet. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "the transmission came from Commander Velnash, the Zephyrian who survived the Jupiter battle. He's warning us that the Federation Council has decided we're not a real threat." Morrison studied the tactical data flowing across his screens. 200 alien ships, representing the combined military might of galactic civilization, were coming to put humanity in its place. "They think we're harmless," he said quietly. "Yes, sir. They've convinced themselves that our victories were accidents." Morrison's weathered face showed the ghost of a smile. "Then they're about to learn why assumptions can be deadly."